Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Can you get the other drum? Sorry. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Tatashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar. Okay. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Give me a break here. Okay. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Hare Krishna. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 18th day of January 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, chapter 29, talks between Narada and King Prachinabharhi, text number 2. Narada Vacha Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Yad Vyanakti Atmanah Puram Yad Vyanaktyatmanak Puram Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Bahu Padam Aparakam Bahupadam Aparakam Narada Vacha Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Yadvyanaktyatmanak Puram Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Bahupadam Aparakam Narada Vacha Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Yadvyanaktyatmanak Puram Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Bahupadam Aparakam. Chant. Narada Vacha Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Yadvyanaktyatmanak Puram Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Bahupadam Aparakam. Narada Vacha Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Yadvyanaktyatmanak Puram Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Bahupadam Aparakam. Narada Vacha Purusham Puranjanam Vidyad Yadvyanaktyatmanak Puram Eka Dvitri Chatuspadam Bahupadam Aparakam. Narada Vacha. Narada said, Purusham, the living entity, the enjoyer. Puranjanam, King Puranjana. Vidyat, one should know. Yat, inasmuch as. Vyanakti, he produces. Atmanaha, of himself. Puram, dwelling place. Eka, one. Dvi, two. Three, three. Chatu, param, with 4 legs. Bahu param, with many legs. Aparakam, without legs. Translation. The great sage Narada Muni continued, you must understand that Puranjan, the living entity, transmigrates according to his own work into different types of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, many-legged, or simply legless. Transmigrating into these various types of bodies, the living entity, as the so-called enjoyer, is known as Puranjan. Okay. Purport. How the spirit soul transmigrates from one type of body to another is nicely described here. The word ekapad, one-legged, refers to ghosts, for it is said that ghosts walk on one leg. The word dvipad, meaning biped, refers to human beings. When he is old and invalid, the human being is supposed to be biped, or three-legged, because he walks with the help of a stick or some kind of cane. Of course, the word chatuspada refers to quadrupeds or animals. The word bahupad refers to those creatures who have more than 4 legs. There are many insects, such as the centipede, and also many aquatic animals that have many legs. The word apadika means without legs. It refers to serpents. The word apadika, meaning without legs, refers to serpents. The name Puranjan indicates one who enjoys possessing different types of bodies. His mentality for enjoyment in the material world is accommodated by different types of bodies. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshurunmiritam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So Narada Muni will continue to explain now this allegory that he's just given us in the previous chapter. And he begins with an explanation, beginning of the explanation of transmigration of the soul. Now you may recall that Krishna also begins with a explanation of transmigration of the soul. Dehinosmin yada dehe komadam yovanam jada tata dehantara prapti dhiras satranam muyati. And there's a reason for this. Puranjan is taken to be like a beginner because he'd been completely absorbed in material activities, albeit making sacrifices to go to heaven. But we understand that this is not a very good plan that he has. He's not executing those sacrifices perfectly so that the animals aren't really killed, but that they get a nice body in the next life. And so they're waiting to take their revenge on him. Narada Muni has shown him that. And we've had this whole allegory describing the fate of someone who is simply absorbed in material life. Although at the end it kind of has a happy ending because it's Puranjan reborn. First of all, he's married to a great devotee, and then he meets the super soul. But we can, from other parts of the Bhagavata, we can understand someone who is grossly sinful and has no idea of transcendental science, yoga, chanting the holy name, can very easily lose the human form of life. Remember the third canto at the end, Kapila Dev was explaining the movements of the living entities, and that's pretty hair-raising. And the fifth canto, it's even more striking. So this principle of karma, of acting in this lifetime and making your future life, is central to the very beginning of spiritual inquiry. Because if this is all there is, then it makes perfect sense to just try to get as much enjoyment as you can and then go out a winner. You make it a winner, right? But if it's not all there is, and it's just one small chapter in a very long book, and that whatever we do has its consequences, and that there is a controller and a whole system of awarding you exactly what you deserve according to the laws set down by these higher authorities, then that's a whole different ballgame, as they say. In other words, that's why you'll find here he's beginning with this idea of transmigration, and there was so much of that in the allegory itself. So why is that so important? Because otherwise there's no real original impetus for inquiring into spiritual life and all of these higher subject matters. Unless one comes to that basic understanding, Najayate Mriyate Vakadachan, there is no birth or death for the soul. It never comes into being. It's always existing, just as eternal as the Lord is. And we're not slain when the body is slain. Then, of course, the inquiring soul says, well, then what happens to me? And then that opens up this whole explanation of getting your just deserts. By the way, for those interested in English language, it's interesting that word dessert, which when we eat cakes and cookies and pies, offer to Krishna, that's with 2 S's. But if it's just desserts, it's only 1 S. Because it comes from the word deserve, you see. So just remember that. Also, one point, this is neither here nor there, but we've had a very rare occurrence in the first line of this verse. You know what it is? Did you pick it up? 9 syllables in the first verse. Occasionally you'll find that irregularity. Very occasionally. However, in the Ishopanishad verses and other Upanishadic verses, there's all kinds of, they're much more free with the strictures of the meter. Just interesting note. So this verse is all about the different varieties, right? According to the work that you perform, you may get a one-legged body, a ghost. What's the typical way one gets a ghost, you know? Suicide. You can see why. You don't want to live. You know, the pain is too much. But you're not, you know, connected to any transcendental practice or anything. It's just it's too painful to live. But you want to enjoy in this senses. So you don't want the body, but you want the senses to enjoy. So you get a ghost body without the senses, you know, and so you have to try to haunt someone or occupy someone's body. You know, it's a very troubling situation. So that's said to have one leg. I thought that they were going to mention trees, because trees often have, you know, one-leg ecopod. That's another ecopod. So this is just a way of describing that there's all different kinds of varieties. Any living entity you see here, and all those you don't see, 8,400,000 of them, you can take according to the activities that you perform and the consciousness that you thus cultivate. So you can see how that suddenly, if you believe that, and this is why it's so important to study and, you know, accept this. You can't see the soul or the transmigration, all of these subtle laws, with our senses or any kind of material instruments that expand our senses. The telescopes, the microscopes, nothing. You can't really come in touch with it. And that's why modern education more or less dismisses this. If you go to a college, where's the class on Sanatan Dharma, you know, and how we can make our life perfect by attaining a purely spiritual body? And you're not going to find it unless you happen to be in Buffalo University in 1968, and there you Rupanuga Prabhu was able to, because he was qualified as a teacher. You know, he already had a degree to have a class on more or less on Krishna consciousness. So many devotees came out of that, leading devotees. Burijan Prabhu, Bhagavan, Lakshmi Moni, Satyanarayan, Ramapad Swami. There are others that don't come to mind. So, but you can see how essential this knowledge is for human life. Otherwise, human life becomes animal life. You're already leading animal life. What is that verse? This one we should know is ahara nidra bhayamaitunancha samanyametat pashupi samana dharmena hina pashupi samana dharma hitesha madiko vishesho dharmena hina pashupa samana. I just heard Prabhupada quote this in a lecture I heard this morning. So he says, we and the animals share these four things: eating, sleeping, mating, defending. You can say, now you get into lower, you know, like, you know, trees and other species, maybe you're not going to see them mating in the same way, you know, there's some kind of reproduction. But you get, you know, any kind of many millions of animals and even the fish and everything. So they all have some way of eating. They have to absorb some nutrients in order to survive, right? And there's the way the body works, it burns up, so it has to recoup, and there's some kind of eating, sleeping. There has to be some reproduction system, mating, and some process of defense against the elements, against the predators, and so forth. You know? So we share those. Now we exaggerate them, you know, to you know, the defense, you know, the so-called defense department. What it is, you're building up weapons and, you know, always making new ones, and so we're eating, sleeping, and mating. Certainly, we all have that. So we share that. So what makes human life special? It can't just be the fact that we defend better and we eat more sophisticated diet or something. That's not it. It's dharma. Dharma is what differentiates human life from animal life. And if there's no dharma in your life, you know, then you're no better than an animal. This word dvipada, this came up here. Dvipada pashu, a two-legged animal. The hands more or less used to be legs. So, therefore, we should be very concerned with Dharma if we want to be human beings, and if we understand the urgency of leading a life that will at least allow us to improve, in our next life, then we have to find out about Dharma. And if we want to know what real Dharma is, we have to consult the Vedic Shastras. First of all, what is the meaning of that word Dharma? The meaning of the Dharma, each Sanskrit word has a certain root syllable, a root word that it's built on, and so many other words can be built from it. So the root of the word Dharma is Dri. This is D-H-R, I think it is. It's the same root for Dhari. Giridhari. Dhari means he who holds up the hill, the supporter of the hill. So that Dharma is something which sustains us, which is our essential nature, which without which we wouldn't be who we are. So when we say we're meaning the soul. What is the essential nature of the soul? And it is to serve. It is to serve. And of course, it finds its perfection in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then we're in our constitutional position, Swarup, and we can stay there forever. If we don't fight against our Dharma and stop serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead and start serving our senses and our mind and so many millions of other things, which leads to frustration and birth and death. So that inquiry into Dharma, you'll notice that at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam and also the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the Dharma is mentioned in a very essential way. Second verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Dharma projatakaitavo tra. The word tra appears 3 times in that verse, meaning here in this Bhagavatam, because he's explaining what's going to be in it and what's not in it. So what's not going to be in it is any expression of kaitava dharma, which means cheating religion. Can you give me an example of a cheating religion? I'm sorry, louder. And then go and do in other words, recognizing that sin is damaging, but trying to cheat. In other words, okay, I understand that I can get absolution, meaning freedom from the reaction of sin, by confessing to the priest. Great, it's a great deal. I can do whatever I want. Once a week, go and confess, then just go on with my life. That's not going to help. Mayavad philosophy is a cheating religion. Trying to convince you that you're God, that you're the absolute truth, that's a cheating religion. That's explained by Sridhar Swami in his commentary on that second verse. Or any materially motivated religion, just going for material causes. Now, Krishna says, even though that may be a cheating religion, it's still religion. In other words, if they come to me, not just as some vague idea of God, but if they come to me, Chaturvada bhajante mam jana sukatadorjana arto jigyasararta jnani chabadatarshaba. He's saying these 4 kinds of pious people do come to me, and they may be materially motivated. Materially motivated. They are to some degree, especially the first 2, the desirous of wealth, or simply in trouble, some disease or something like that. But they're going to Krishna. And so if they go to Krishna and they pray ardently to the deity, for relief from some pain or some money to pay your rent or something like that, whatever it may be. It's not pure, but because it's to Krishna, if you keep coming, you'll eventually become attracted to learn more, whatever. In other words, it's least pious. But the really pious one is the jnani, those who are curious, and especially the jnani who wants to get real transcendental knowledge and knows that he can get it, in Krishna. So the cheating religion will not help us. That is a way of staying bound in this material world. And that's what Prachinabharisha was doing. This whole section of the Karma Kanda is most understandable when we, this section where Prachinabharisha is performing these material activities, these sacrifices of animals. Why? To go to heaven. thinking that you'll be able to enjoy more later, right? So it's religion in the service of enjoyment. That's what basic cheating principle is. So that is kicked out at the beginning of Bhagavatam, and certainly in Gaudiya Vaishnava. What is that key verse? I'll say the first word. Anya Bilashita. Okay, I'm going to explain it simply because it's hard to hear. So this is a central verse. It's right at, I don't know what number, right? Maybe I think it's 11th verse in the whole Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Samrita Sindhu. This is the central principle of what we're doing, of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Lord Chaitanya expresses the same thing in his Shikshastika. So this is the definition of Uttama Bhakti. Uttama Bhakti. There's also different kinds of Mishra Bhaktis. You mix in some material motivation or some Gyan, some karma. We're not interested in that. Lord Chaitanya wasn't interested in it. So, Anya Abhilashita Shunyam, devoid of other desires, such as going to heaven, getting liberation, or going here, or whatever. Defined as Jnana, Karma, Adi, etc. Whatever else you make. Jnana generally means leading to liberation. Karma is leading to sense gratification, maybe on the heavenly planets or somewhere, but still, you're the main enjoyer. Not covered over. In other words, you're performing some dharma, like Krishna Barisha, but it's covered. The motivation is for you to go to heaven and enjoy. That's not what we're talking about here. Anavritam. So that's when it isn't. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. Behavior, activity that is favorably directed toward Krishna. In other words, for his pleasure. Your very motive is to please Krishna. That's the essence of the whole thing. Your motive is to please Krishna. That's Bhakti Uttama. Now, you can't just, say, oh, okay, let me try it. It doesn't work that way. You have to serve, because we're so conditioned, you may think that you can do that, and it's good. You may bring something for the deity and so forth. But to really get serious about it, you need to approach someone who's an intermediary, a pure devotee, the guru. Because that's the person who can guide you, who you can serve and please, and you can see that he's pleased, because you're service to Krishna. You're chanting Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said chant Hare Krishna, so we chanted Hare Krishna. What do we really know of Krishna? Well, not much. But we know Prabhupada is pleased. You see? So, okay, let's keep doing it, And as soon as you do that, you're actually in touch with Krishna, you start to feel the effects. And that effects, which is always positive, feeling of peace, less depression, less attraction to these, alluring things which we're surrounded with. Plus, a little bit of blips of ecstasy in the kirtans and so forth. Even the first day you come into the storefront or the temple or wherever it is. So that increases your faith, and you're more willing to follow more instructions from the guru, giving us through the shastra. This is how it works. That's why Narada Muni had to come to get on Prachanabhari's case. And because he was Narada Muni, Prachanabhari stopped the sacrifice and he listened, inquired. And he took this strategy of giving this allegory, which is often very effective. Just like in the Bible, there are so many stories, of morality, that the little things that you can remember that teach a lesson, isn't it? And that's a very effective way of teaching, because people can relate to it. You can relate to a little story. Too much philosophy, especially in this age, is hard to grasp. That's why the Bhagavatam is filled with stories, but it's also filled with a lot of heavy philosophy. So our presentation of Krishna consciousness to others. Now, of course, there's the chanting, just like you're going to go out. Unfortunately, I don't have time. But Harinam Sankirtan, this was Lord Chaitanya's great revolutionary practice and principle that he taught. That why is that so important? Well, for one thing, it's great for the participants. Everyone knows. I remember that was 3 hours a day. We used to have this is like a central principle. We go out 3 hours a day. Wow. And you're not just going onto some street. You're going out to downtown Manhattan, to chant Hare Krishna. So that sense that you're giving also to people, that's a very important part of the whole experience. That is so purifying. So that is there. But then when it comes time for people to be a little inquisitive, then you can speak to them, but most importantly, give them the books. And you'll find that, so many of the books, like the Science of Self-Realization book, which is often the first book given to people, it deals with these questions first. The science of the soul. Who is the soul? All this in the transmigration. And then it goes on to the other things, the chanting, it's very nicely arranged. Jai Maharaj picked out those articles from the BTGs and made that book. It's a very wonderful book. And the other book following in the principles, the journey of self-discovery, we did some others like that. But the first chapter is always about this, the soul. Unless people, can at least accept tentatively that they're the spirit, not matter, and that we're eternal. I mean, that's such good news, isn't it? To find out that you'll never die, It's a total illusion that you're dying. But it's a very powerful experience. It's not the end of experience. It's something you go through, And what happens is you forget everything. But in your forgetfulness, you're at the mercy of the material nature. And according to how you acted and all the consciousness you created, you're going to get your next life. And when you realize that, then the next principle is, okay, then let me find out how to act and what consciousness to cultivate to get the best next life. And if you come to that point, you're far along in being, open and receptive to the idea, okay, so this is now certain do's and don'ts by which you can progress toward a life of endless happiness, ever-increasing happiness, and zero unhappiness, and zero dukkha, maximum sukha, minimum dukkha. So that's, which really is everybody's desire, They would love to have that, but then they say, oh, no, this is a material world. Okay, you got to take the ups and the downs, and so now you try to maximize your happiness, which means as much sense gratification as you get, which just gets you more entangled and it produces more suffering. It's an impossible situation. It only makes sense because there are agents like Narada Muni and Srila Prabhupada and all these Shastra, which is expanded into these millions and millions of books, where people can be given a choice. Otherwise, they have the choice between the gallows and the electric chair. That's really their choice. In other words, there is no choice, meaningful choice, without understanding what real Dharma is and how they can practice it, and having examples. This is why the movement is so important. This was Prabhupada's baby, his child. He wanted to write, and he did write as much as he could, but at the same time, he took care of developing this movement and working so hard to establish that temple in Bombay, which since that, while it was being built, the center they were preaching, and afterward it's become a beacon of Krishna consciousness all over the country and throughout the world, really. So those elements are very important. The deity worship, the prasadam, the mantra, of course, is essential. That's foundational. The books, the practices, the principles of staying clean. All of it fits into a whole lifestyle and a logical working whole, which gives us a chance to perfect our lives and other people to take it up. And so that's what we're doing here, and it's all based on the Bhagavatam. You can see how when this allegory is going to be explained in great detail, and it's actually a lesson. Narada Muni is giving us a lesson here, which we can take. We have to adapt, to how we can use that in our own preaching, as well as take instruction from it. And it all begins with this transmigration of the soul and the law of karma. And, it teaches us how to live within the world. Like this COVID thing is actually also a big lesson. We can take lessons from all of this. I mean, it's going to be a year now soon, really, where we've had this, and maybe it's getting up to 10 months where it's been like a lockdown, total transformation of our lives. But to see the central core of it, for those who, is still intact, because that really, we're so fortunate to have the temple, obviously, to stay strong and gathering with others is so important, other devotees. But really, when it breaks down to it, it's all dependent on you. Ultimately, it's just you and your mind, if you're very ill and so forth, you're facing. And you rely on your assets in Krishna consciousness, your training, of the mind and the senses, not to just react to the pains that are coming. I'm at the age where I get unexplainable pains, which fortunately so far have been also leaving. They come and then they go, kind of, And then every time I can't restrain and I dance a little bit, I know, okay, there's going to be an ankle pain, there's going to be a shin pain. It's like that, But that's life, And it's wonderful that we've heard this before. How there's so many warnings, the hair turning gray, and certain things happening that are warning you. Okay, time is coming. You're getting older. You're going to die soon. So to become more serious and more focused and more pleading to Krishna, empower me to advance nicely. That's just the way material life is. Most people, it's just a horrible thing, like the internet. I mean, where do these guys all make their money? By selling you information about you, so that other people can try to sell you things. That's a big thing. So somehow they understand, things that I bought. They say, oh, this guy must be old, so they try to sell me this. Every so often there's advertisements so you can improve your sex life. That comes pretty almost daily, and but it's like the material energy is also telling you you're getting old, but they're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to teach you something. This is Prabhupada's great strength. He wasn't just trying to make money. I was thinking today about Amala Bhakta Prabhu, Swami, who I knew from before I joined, and he had a great story, which he then, when he joined finally in L.A., and I was working at BTG, we sat down one day, and he told me his whole story of how he escaped from that situation he was in. It's fascinating. I'll read it sometime. It's in the old BTG, it's from the 70s. And he had committed himself fully to this Hatha Yoga program. And there was a elder yogi who had started in New York, and he would periodically come. And there was a book, when he was a young man, of all of his asanas and doing all the asanas and everything. And that was my first yoga experience. And I got into wholly and solely for material purposes, to try to regain my health after a serious bout with hepatitis. And so, there was Amala Bhakta. I think it's called Shiva Prem Swami or something like that at that time. May have it wrong. But, I wasn't thinking him as a guru, but he was the teacher there, and I respected him. And we also had other classes, I forget, some kind of classes in philosophy. I forget what it was. All I remember is getting my first Krishna mantra from there that we were supposed to chant. And I would take a 2-hour trip from Long Island, into the city, so I had plenty of time to chant it. Some of you may recognize this mantra. Om Abhavitrova Svabhavastam Gatopi Va Yaksmaret Pundarikaksham Yabhayabhyandara Shuchihi. This is what the mantra when you get initiated for purification. Om Abhavitra, and it's about Krishna, and it mentions the lotus-eyed Lord. Whether pure or impure. Om Apavitra Pavitrova. Not Pavitra is pure. Whether impure or pure. Whoever remembers the lotus-eyed Lord, Pundarikaksham, is purified both within and without. Now, I don't even remember him telling us the meaning of it. It was just we were supposed to chant it, but we're chanting it. I'm chanting it and coming in and out. So I was chanting Krishna's name there. Maybe that helped me. But he told me what happened is that he was so good at what he was doing. So dedicated. He was serious. And he was older. He's at least 15 years older than me. He's in his mid to late 80s now. And they were going to give him a whole center in Rishikesh. And you have to realize that in those days, a lot of Westerners were going there because I think the Beatles went there or something, and touring, and they would get stop in these ashrams. So it would have been very lucrative, And he would have been in charge of that. That was his thing. So he told me that later. But what would happen would be that periodically the guru would come, the founder would come to New York, and then it was expected. They would put him up into a penthouse, rent a penthouse. You can imagine how much that was. This is on the east side of Manhattan, the most expensive place in the world. And he would stay there for a week, and he would meet with people. And I went and lined it up, and I met with him. You paid $15, I think it was. And you could have like a few minutes of maybe 10 minutes, interview. No indication of what it was for, the purpose. If you paid like $50, you can get initiated, which I wasn't ready for, thank God. And so I met with him. I don't remember even what happened there. But later on he told me that he became disillusioned because, the guru would come and that would just be like basically a business thing, And he was getting fat. He was getting fat. You have to realize this Hatha Yoga thing was all on physical, thing. And there you have this book, and he's a young man, and svelte and thin, and doing all these pretzel things and doing all the asanas. But he had let himself go. In other words, he was indulging, now that he had so much money, etc. So Amala became disenchanted. And but he felt that there was a lot of pressure on him to stay. So he walked across town. Now, we had this temple in Manhattan at that time. The famous 55th Street Temple, which is quite impressive. The deities, Radha Govinda, and, So he heard a lecture by one of our leading sannyasis there, and he was just blown away, Amala Bhakta. So he went back, and then his thoughts were simply on how can I get out of here, So one night he packed his bag. Have you seen these big Indian trunks that they have sometimes, like they're aluminum or whatever, So he had one of those, put out whatever he could fit in there, and then he snuck out, he dragged that thing somehow down the stairs, and they didn't have an elevator, and across town, and he stayed in there. But and then he showed up in the LA temple. This is a few years later. I was there at 75, and I first met him in 72, so it was a few years. And he shows up in the Prasadam hall one day. And all I could do is think, oh my God, he's an established yogi, in New York. He must be coming to try to get our bhaktas. So I told Dhanava Prabhu, who wasn't a sannyasi yet, but he was running the new bhakta program, which he wrote the book. You ever seen that book, Fortunate Souls? So I told him, watch out for that guy, I know him from New York. He's a yogi. He's probably coming to try to get our bhaktas, But it turned out that even though he was like in his 40s already, he was ready to become a bhakta. He read some books, like that. And then he told me his story. So, Prabhupada was dealing with that. All kinds of these bogus yoga studios were coming up. He had lived in one. So you'll find a lot of that in the 6th chapter. And the wonderful recordings, we used to call them yoga system tapes now, the recordings of Prabhupada speaking about the 6th chapter. So there's a battle. In other words, we have our own battle in trying to stay strict in our sadhana and do our duties and advance nicely in Krishna consciousness. But we also are on a battlefield in which we are trying to enlighten as many people as possible and play our part in the Sankirtan movement so that Krishna consciousness can spread and so many people can be benefited. And we know book distribution is the best way, as Prabhupada said, because it's permanent. These books, of course they can be discarded, but a lot of times, especially the hardback, if the people, especially if they paid for them, they'll say, okay, well, let me see, maybe I'll read it later. It goes in a shelf, and it may stay there for years. And the person who bought it, or their adolescent kid or something, may pick it up, and it piques their curiosity. Let's face it, anytime you open one of Prabhupada's books, especially Bhagavad Gita, there's going to be a lot of things in there that are completely mysterious. But there's so much potency there that it often causes someone to want to pursue and find out more about it. But there's the small books, other books that are designed to be a little more relatable, not so many strange terms, whatever. But ultimately people come to this Srimad Bhagavatam. It's selling so many sets is such a wonderful thing. And there's so much in it. And that first canto, there's passage in there that are just right from the present day. Prabhupada is speaking about these false leaders and the politicians and creating a dungeon of demons, and it's, who can't relate to that? So we're very fortunate to have all of these effects. And now we're going to go through, Narada Muni will nicely explain even more than has been explained. A lot of the purports were based on commentary that's taken from this part of Narada's explanation. So we're going to get a thorough review of the elements of this allegory. And then there's a wonderful end to it, where there's a startling statement at the end where Puranjan was wondering, well, how does the transmigration work in the soul? And he there's this thing about being able to access all the memories, because what makes our life in this world possible and the transmigration is the fact that we forget. You forget all of those horrible things that you did in your last lives. Can you imagine? You're trying to remember your life as an insect, and or how you died last time, or all the people. It would be impossible, to live with that kind of memory. So you forget all that. But he says that by the means of yoga, you can access those. And pure devotee, you can access those memories and deal with them. In other words, you're so strong in your Krishna consciousness that even though you may remember so many things in past lives, it doesn't affect your consciousness and you're strong enough. So that was a pretty amazing revelation. Will come at the end of this chapter or the next chapter. All right, I'll read this translation again. The great sage Narada Muni continued, "You must understand that Puranjan, the living entity, transmigrates according to his own work into different types of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, many-legged, or simply legless. Transmigrating into these various types of bodies, the living entity, as the so-called enjoyer, is known as Puranjan." Any comments, questions from the locals? Or Tapas, you there?
Yes, Prabhu. We have chance.
Are you going to say something?
Nice, very nice class. That's all I can say.
Okay. No questions from the, used to call them the peanut gallery, from the guests?
No question from YouTube.
Okay. All right. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you. We are very thankful to His Grace Dravida Prabhu for helping us understand the important aspect of transmigration, and also sharing that wonderful example, highlighting once again the Krishna conscious philosophy presented unadulterately by Srila Prabhupada has transformed lives of many through that example of the Hatha Yogi. So a brief introduction about Dravida Prabhu. He's a disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He's a Vaishnava scholar, musician and poet. He has edited Back to Godhead magazines and other books published by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust for over 25 years. From 1983 to 89, he was part of the team that produced the last 6,000-page volumes of the magnum opus of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, a commentated English translation of India's jewel of Vedic wisdom, the 18,000 verse Srimad Bhagavatam, that is Bhagavat Purana. He also helped produce the revised version of Srila Prabhupada's 9-volume Chaitanya Charitamrita during 95 and 96, and his Krishna book from 94 to 95. In addition to his editing work, he teaches Bhakti Yoga classes at the Los Angeles and San Diego ISKCON centers. Throughout all this immersion in transcendental literature, Dravida Dasa developed the love of the Sanskrit language and especially the elaborate Sanskrit prosody of the Bhagavatam, portions of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and other Bhakti literature. His devotion and expertise in chanting form a marvelous combination. He is a brahmachari since many decades. As already mentioned, he is Srila Prabhupada's disciple. Devotees can unmute themselves to share any reflections. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Sri Bhagavad Prabhu, thank you for playing the video.
Hare Krishna.
It's quite interesting when Prabhuji has explained the story of the yogi who was following that yogic process, and then once when he heard the bhakti class from one of these sannyasis, then he got attracted. So Prabhupada's purport and books are very powerful. So once they get the taste, I think they get attracted. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Yes, Prabhuji. Okay. So then we'll conclude the class. So we'll meet again tomorrow. We'll conclude with Vaishnava pranams. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha krupasindhubhyevacha patitanam bhavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.